the message and the feedback I would have is like, what is your wild vision? Like, how wild is it? And are you 100% sure that everybody who's on the boat has the same level of confidence on that vision by what they do, how they act, the questions they ask, how they come back to work every day?
This is BizNinja Entrepreneur Radio with your host, Tyler Jorgensen.
Welcome out to this week's episode of BizNinja Entrepreneur Radio. I am your host, Tyler Jorgensen. And today we have Gabriel Gonzalez. He is here with his company, Casalu. And I'm going to say a lot of these things wrong because he's got this really cool Spanish accent, and you're just going to have to hear from him. But welcome out to the show. I'm excited to learn about Casalu and everything you got going on.
Tyler, man, thank you for giving me the time, pretty excited. I guess to tell you a little bit about it, I'm a founder. I'm originally from Venezuela, so I'm an immigrant. Came here to the States in 2012, in what I would call like the middle of an economic and social implosion that was happening back home, and I was lucky to come here with my brother to the U.S. And out of all places, ended up in Raleigh, North Carolina. I like to joke that when my friends were going to Disney World, I was going to Smithfield, which is kind of like where the hog farms are. That's where my aunt was. And man, that was just the beginning of what's been an amazing journey that not only led me and my family to the US, but also to start a company that I love and many other things. So let's get to it.
Well, so I'm excited to have you here and learn more about just the entire journey of where, from Venezuela to now running a really cool, ready to drink beverage company. We're going to get into that. But I want to zoom just really on you for a minute. When was that moment where you first realized you were an entrepreneur?
Look, I think it's not even necessarily when I realized it. My dad likes to say that once I was very young. I was a kid. He's an engineer. He was a small business owner. He ran a small company, services that would retrofit machinery in industrial settings. And he took me one day, me and my brother, to one of these factories. And then he was trying to show me like, hey, here's how the machine works. Here's how it fills the bottles and how it cuts things, trying to be all engineering with me. And cool, Dad. How much are you charging for this? And then as a 6-year-old, he was, and still till this day will say, that's when he realized that business was probably going to be more of my path than engineering.
Yeah, you just had that mindset. And I think that's what's so fascinating is most entrepreneurs, it's not like something, I've been doing this show 15 years, over 500 interviews. Less than, I would say, 1 or 2% of people ended up in business without some story like this, right? Most people are built and born an entrepreneur. Yeah. Other people become business owners. And I just don't think it's quite the same thing, right? And so it's just kind of how you're wired. It's just different. What was the first thing that you did in business? Maybe I'm assuming this wasn't the very first thing you ever tried. What was that first thing where you're like, oh, okay, I'm going to start a company?
Man, for me, it was a bit tricky, I would say, because I think fast forward to coming to the States, being 17, and there's a lot of limitations about what you can do based on the visa you're in.
Right. And
I think I was lucky in a couple different ways. So my journey into entrepreneurship in the US was a big part. I owe it to a guy. He came to the first business class that I had at NC State, and he said, look, I'm willing to talk about entrepreneurship or life over a coffee at 6 a.m. or a beer at 10 p.m. My reaction was like, wow, people do this in America. And I followed up. And what ended up happening is that this guy was launching what he called the Entrepreneurship Clinic, which was a center that wasn't located on campus, but it was in downtown Raleigh. And we would take classes there for those who wanted to get involved. And the way it would work is that you would end up working with startups on projects. And to me, that was my first real exposure towards meeting founders who were starting startups. A lot of them were failing or going through struggles. So as a college student, seeing that breadth of all kinds of different businesses was the real first exposure into startups. And for me, my first internship, which I would say is like the first true exposure, was an energy drink company that was launching out of the region. And, it was 3 people getting started, knocking on doors. It was my first CPG experience in consumer goods, right? So trying to sell something. And that's when I realized that I never wanted to be in consumer goods, but here I am, full circle moment. Yeah. And that's
so back then you have that experience, and the takeaway from the experience was, this isn't what I want to do.
Totally.
And now that's what you're doing.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So let's close the gap between the then and now, right? So what were some of the other things you did before you decided to launch Casalu?
So I was able to, certain programs that are allowed through your visa while you're a student, take internships. So that first internship that I mentioned with a company called Mati Energy was about sales. It was being a brand ambassador, trying to get the product into different retailers. And definitely since that time, I had a passion for getting, in this case, this product into Hispanic retailers, and I was able to do that with them. And then I started to get just more exposed to technology. So I always thought I was going to be on the tech side, and got exposed to venture capital. So I was able to do internships with venture capital fund out in Silicon Valley. And that's how I started to see that like whole ecosystem. And then what happened is when I graduated, one of the things that's important to note is in order to stay in the country on the visa side, if you work for a nonprofit or a university, you get to skip a lottery process. So in my case, that meant working for NC State and developing the startup accelerator that they had to invest in early stage startups. So I ran that, and I ran that entrepreneurship clinic that first I had joined as a student, and then ended up being the guy running it, cool. Where I got to see thousands and thousands of startups and get exposed to that network and build it.
Yeah. So I think this is fascinating. One of your first experiences tell you don't do CPG. Then you work in a clinic where you see like hundreds of opportunities, all the things you can do. Yeah. What made you decide to go ahead and do Casalu?
The thing about Casalu, which I think it was always part of my DNA, is that my side of the story, alongside my co-founders, mine really came from understanding the wave that I was passionate about. So if you think about Casalu, it's a result of 2 things converging. One being that our generation has started to switch the way we drink from mostly beer, complementing or switching it with hard seltzers and ready-to-drink cocktails. Like, that's a wave that we had seen. And we've had experience. When we were in college, everybody would just drink Busch Light and Bud Light. And now I challenge you, go to a college campus and you probably see a lot of hard seltzers out there, if not the majority of the drinks being had. And the flip side of it, what it collided with was our understanding and our belief that our culture, Latino culture, is where Black culture was when we were kids. So when we were kids, we were growing up to the NBA, to Kanye, to Jay, like really African Americans were starting to dominate global culture, really set the narrative, control their own destiny in terms of the brands that they were building at the time. And that's something we hadn't seen yet on our side, but we were starting to see the switch. Like we grew up with those fascinating phenomenons, and then now kids are growing up to Bad Bunny and Lionel Messi playing soccer at in the MLS. That is just a radical cultural shift, and it shouldn't be a surprise, right? 25% of Gen Z is Latino in the US.
I'll tell you, I was at an all-star game, the MLB all-star game a few years ago, and everyone that came out got cheers. And then Bad Bunny would come out and the place would blow up. It was wild. I hadn't seen that level of star power, like from, one person when you're in a mixed audience. It was crazy.
Well, think about it from a music perspective, right? When we were kids, like for people from our culture to really stand out, they had to switch to English. Like you see Shakira, Ricky Martin, you see Pitbull, like they had to play by different rules. Bad Bunny hasn't launched a single song where he sings in English. Like he does not do that. He doesn't have to anymore. It was like, how am I authentically Latino? And not that singing in English wasn't. It's just like the rules are different.
And he was able to stick to his rules instead of having to worry about it. Yeah, no, I definitely see the evolution. And so, real quick, how long ago did you start Casalu?
So we started officially. We started working with the idea, or started thinking about the idea in 2020, when my co-founder, who was never a big fan of beer, but he loved beer moments, saw High Noon, and it said vodka seltzer, and he said, why isn't there one made with rum, and why isn't there one made for Latinos, for us, or that I saw and I felt quickly identified with? Because if you look at beer, it's a widespread, right? Like you see Modelo, you see Pacifico, they're all very authentic. And so he bought a SodaStream, he went full on Breaking Bad, started making it at home. And then I visited him. He was living in Atlanta at the time. We had both gone to school before together in NC State. And I tried it, and it was like, that's where we put two and two together. It was, look, our culture is going through this massive shift, and this makes a lot of sense as to be the product and the beginning of creating a brand that can really speak to our generation. And that was in 2020. In 2021 is when we really started working on the company, which was kind of crazy. We ended up going through the accelerator at our university. Oh, cool. We got $5,000 of non-dilutive funding, which you can't really do anything in our industry with that.
No.
So what we did was we bought a SodaStream, like Ricardo had, and then we bought a keg. And then with the rest of the money, we paid for a trademark, and then we moved to Miami for a month. It was a tiny house behind a tiny house. We would sleep horizontally together, and we started crashing parties to take our drink and get feedback from the market to see if it would resonate. And we even changed our recipe based on that experience. Awesome. So that was in 21, and then
so because just in case people haven't heard, figured it out yet, what is Casalu? Like, what is
Yeah, absolutely. So it is rum, sparkling water, and juice. That's it.
Cool. And it's sold as a ready to drink premix cocktail can. It's
sold just like this in this can. This is one of our flavors, which is lemon lime. We also have passion fruit maracuya, which is our second flavor. And we initially launched just with a single flavor, which was the limon one. And that's what it is, man. It was
cool. And so you guys, 2021, you start crashing parties. When was the moment when you were like, I think this is going to work?
It was a combination of things. I think the first time was definitely that, when we would give it to people and we would ask them, what do you think it's made out of, without telling them? And they would normally just say their favorite liquor base. So they would say crazy things like gin or mezcal, which have absolutely nothing to do. And that's when we realized, like, okay, in the right occasion, the right brand will communicate with this audience, and they'll simply take it as whatever their favorite thing is. So that was, I think, the first realization of it. And I think the second one was during that same period, we got COVID, obviously, crashing parties in Miami. And then we were pretty much just laying in bed, and then we get an email of someone who had purchased on our website. At that time, we didn't have a real product in the street, right? We had a keg that we were giving samples to people.
Right.
We have a mock-up of the can online, and someone bought it, and then we realized it was a venture capital guy out of Colorado, and to us was like, holy, let's call this guy and figure out what's going on. Called him, didn't pick up, call him again, and then now he picks up and says, hey, and we ask him, hey man, you just bought something that doesn't exist, but tell me more. And he said, oh, I've been looking at this space. Rum makes sense. No one's done it. There's a lot of vodka, maybe tequila seltzers out there, but rum still till this day, it's been 3-4 years, hasn't really been touched. And definitely no one has figured out how to convey it accordingly to this generation of Latinos. If you look at the market, they're typically locked out with the current offerings that are out there. And we believe that there's a chance for something authentic to cut through and make its own mark. And I think that's when we knew, like, okay, there's something here.
All right. So what happened with that conversation? Did he give you?
He ended up not being the investor for Casalu, but he gave us the confidence to go out and raise money. Yeah. And we ended up raising capital for our seed round from Tom Rigg, the CEO of Caesars Entertainment, and 3 other board members of Caesars, which is very random how we got to that.
Yeah. When was that? Was that still 2021?
Yeah, that was October of 21.
Awesome. So really within your first year, of actually running it, doing tests, hitting the streets.
Yep.
You got a random internet hit from one VC. Yep. And then how did you connect with, that's weird to close the board of Caesars basically.
Yeah, it's incredibly wild. It happened because one of my mentors from NC State, his name is Dave Tomic, he, when I realized that we needed to raise cash, he had been an advisor years before. I reached out. I hadn't talked to the guy in 2-3 years. And he said, hey, come, let's talk about it. And I knew he was in entertainment somehow, but I didn't know where or how. So here I am, driving to a country club and pumping a SodaStream, completely not what you would want to be doing without official legal status in the country. Yeah. And ended up meeting with him, and he looked at it, tried it, and basically what he said was, okay, what you're telling me is that if you had this in front of the right audience, you would sell a gazillion cans. And I told him, that's exactly what I'm telling you. And then he said, okay, I am in the board of Caesars. Maybe I know a person or two who might be interested. I don't know. I can't make any promises. And about a week after, he came back to me and said, hey, myself and 3 other guys will take care of funding this round, and let's make it happen.
Awesome.
So that was wild. It's not normal. And
well, no, that actually makes perfect sense. You had, somebody that you networked with at school through basically not only alumni relationship, but also through that accelerator.
Yep.
You had built a relationship. Those type of people generally have connections. They either sit on other boards or groups. Yep. And he went to bat for you and brought back. That is exactly how school networks are supposed to work, right? Yeah. If you do those things. So I think that makes perfect sense. It wasn't like you met the guy on a plane or something, right? That makes perfect sense. And so you guys, I believe you're roughly in 275 plus locations now. Yep. You've got real distribution, you got real cans and real manufacturing. So if we fast forward now from, end of 2021, where things are finally starting to take place, to 2025, what are some of your biggest wins that have happened since then?
Look, I think our biggest wins are there are a few. I would say I would split them. First, retail, being able to have a product that we think could stand the test of retail, which is extremely hard for anybody trying to go into retail. We just closed a pilot with Walmart. We're rolling out all the Whole Foods in Florida. We rolled out Winn-Dixie Liquors, which is a big chain in Florida. And is validation and putting it in front of our customers, and that there's something there. I think that took us a long time. I mean, it took us almost 3 years to even see any type of real traction, which is a very tough position to be at. It requires you to be very efficient. I think the other super win is, I would say, staying true to ourselves. I think every experience that we've had we call it not falling for perverse incentives. Mm-hmm. This industry is a lot about capital and paying your way to be in places and funding things that might not make sense, be it being at every concert or venue, or we have an internal joke that every week someone's going to come and give you a proposal for $5,000. And if you do all those, you're going to run out of money pretty quickly.
Yep.
And I think we've just gotten better and better to just stay true to ourselves in that sense. And that's a huge win for Casalu and for ourselves as entrepreneurs.
What's one venue or location that would be like a home run for you that you would just love to be in?
So I'm going to give you two. There's on-premise and there's off-premise. So
okay, that's fine. I'll take both of those.
That's my excuse. On-premise, I would tell you the Inter Miami Stadium. That would be a no-brainer. I think it's just the right occasion for drinking Casalus and enjoying time with family and a chill drink and being with friends. That's a huge win. And then the other one would be Publix. For us who are in Florida, that's the number one retailer. They have 1,300 stores just in the state of Florida. And it's where people shop, especially in the occasions where you would normally have a beer or go to a pool or go to a place that makes sense. And those are my two. Yeah,
those are solid. What about the other thing I like is dream brand endorsement. If some celebrity or, you dropped Bad Bunny already, and maybe that's the answer. But if somebody just one day was posting and saying, "Guys, I just found this. You absolutely need to go check it out." Who would that be?
It's hard to give you any other answer that's not Benito. And
that's okay.
The reason being that we call this we almost have this image of Vogue. We call it Vogue Latino. But what we mean by that is not necessarily luxury. We mean by that is that if you look at Bad Bunny, he could be wearing flip-flops in Puerto Rico at the beach, wearing his Rolex, but also he'll be at Paris Fashion Week or be with his grandma making a barbecue, right? That type of range is how we think about the ideal partners for Casalu.
Yeah.
And it's very important for us to have that kind of range. And we see it across not only music, but other pillars of culture.
So how many times have you reached out to him?
I will say that we've been close enough.
Okay.
Yes.
Almost. We're keeping it We're keeping it going. What's your advice? You've worked in an accelerator. You've now had your feet in the mud of building this up, right? What's your advice to somebody getting started if they're considering entering the space of consumer, CPG or even RTD alcohol? Yeah,
look, I think we came from a background of not knowing anything about the industry. So I think this applies across the board, where coming in with a curious mindset typically wins than having a set of rules that quote unquote experts might give out. It's important to have some of those around you as a sounding board and to challenge your notion, but moving quick with your gut, it really makes a huge difference. I think in general, every industry will have some of those perverse incentives that I mentioned. So being careful with those landmines is important. And I would recommend, I asked an investor once, hey, what happens if your money goes to zero, it goes completely to waste? And he told me, you should read a book called Quit by Annie Duke. And when I read it, I think, this is pretty famous in Silicon Valley. And the point being that having basically a kill switch or a stopping moment where you say, look, if I don't reach this by X amount of time, it's just a healthy point in time to not keep banging your head against the wall, and having someone who can help you keep track of that. It's important because then you'll have another shot at something else.
Yep.
But whatever that is, whether it's a year or 10 years or whatever the number works for you, understanding that is important, because a lot of the best founders out there have figure out when to stop and try something else, and that the second or third time is what's really hit for them.
Yeah.
So now
so many people get stuck on, if it doesn't work, that means I'm a failure and I'm not good at this, where it's like, no, like this is a game of tries. How many times are you actually getting up there and making an attempt? Yeah. It is abnormal for, and I know a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of business owners, and it is very abnormal that their first thing is either A, successful, or B, the thing they're still doing now, right? Like you should be iterating and trying different things. What's your big play for Casalu? How long are you running this beast?
Since the beginning, we said like, our dream was, we believe that the next Red Bull is going to be Latino. How does that look like, right? And we started testing even the name Casalu. We put it next to like Casalu Football Club or Casalu Hot Sauce. Like we would just test the boundaries of like where this could go if it really stood the test of time. So see ourselves running it for a decade. Obviously, we've taken venture capital fund and angel investors. So the one thing that everybody listening to this that maybe hasn't or is thinking about raising money, at the end of the day, that capital has to be returned. So, most likely that means either a full exit later on from the business, and that's how you make your money. That's how most people make their money. Yep. Or a partial where those individual investors could be paid back and see some kind of return, ideally.
Some sort of liquidation event, either a full sale, or your one bigger investors coming in to replace the others, right? Those kind of plays.
Right.
Yeah.
So
last question on business, and then one more on personal, and we'll wrap up here.
Yeah.
You had a co-founder. Let's take this way. What advice do you have for other people that have a partner on how to make partnerships work?
So we were originally 3 co-founders, and now there's 2 of us.
Yep.
And I think my biggest advice for these partnerships, first of all, I would never do it personally, alone. It's made the world's difference. I have nothing but mad respect for what we call solopreneurs, but I don't know how they do it. I have an amazing relationship with my co-founder. Our third co-founder, simply, he was the right partner at the time, and he's no longer in the company. But the message and the feedback I would have is like, what is your wild vision? Like, how wild is it? And are you 100% sure that everybody who's on the boat has the same level of confidence on that vision by what they do, how they act, the questions they ask, how they come back to work every day? And if they're not in sync, I think it's very, very tough, if not impossible, to honestly get anybody in sync. And I don't think they should be anyways. Yeah. So
I think that's why people will sometimes steer towards solopreneurship instead of a partnership. And it's not because partnerships are bad. It's because they had a partnership that wasn't properly aligned. And you have,
correct.
Speaking of perverse incentives, you'll have a partner who just wanted to be able, they were excited about the project, but they weren't ready to work on it. They thought they could just put their name on it and, chip in 10% of the work for 50% of the output.
Right.
My favorite advice when I asked this question was, both partners have to work like they're 100% owners, right? Yeah. Like it's not like, well, they are not carrying their weight. You just focus on carrying as much as you can. And then, because there's going to be seasons where each person does more or less, just that's how humans are.
Totally. I mean, I think, if you think about a brand like ours, the nature is just, there's a lot of lifestyle, art, flavor, marketing, product. And Ricardo and I, who are still in the business operating, we are always 100% on each other's side. And not everybody's like that, right? Like a lot of times you're adding a partner to that quote unquote partner, but it's like, it's almost like you have it because you don't want to do that stuff. It's the stuff that you don't want to do, and you kind of hope it's going to work out. But at the end of the day, it's like, do you really want to do it that way? Or could you pay for it? Or could you outsource it? Or if you try to do it yourself, you realize it's not as much work, and maybe you're better off being the one just doing and getting that through.
Yeah, partnerships should not solve what hiring a VA could solve.
Right, exactly.
So I'm a firm believer that business is not supposed to be your only thing in life, right? That business it should not take up everything. What is one item on your personal bucket list you're going to achieve in the next 12 months?
I'm going to have my first kid.
That's a big deal.
Yeah, that's a huge deal.
Is that already in play, or do we need to let somebody else know this?
Fortunately, everybody's aware.
Okay, that's good.
It's due October of this year. Very excited.
Awesome.
Family obviously is first. It's big, and I am definitely guilty of putting too much time into work. But I would say if there's something on my personal list or bucket list that's going to happen at a personal level, is that one, and yeah,
that's pretty great, man. Think, congratulations on that. Where do people go to check out Casalu and to learn more about you guys?
Instagram is honestly the best spot. So at Drink Casalu, Casalu, is the best spot to see what we're up to, and we have a lot of surprises, things that are coming out in the next few weeks. So come check it out, give us a follow. We would love to, ship you some product if you're not in the state, or if you're in Florida for some reason, then come by us, give us a shout, and we'll have a conversation.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Gabriel. Really good getting to know you. To all my biz ninjas, it is your turn to go out and do something.